Namaste and welcome to Chitti Media's Current Affairs show. Today I have with us Miss Lavanya Vemsani ji. She is an Indic scholar based in the US. Namaste Lavanya ji, welcome to the show.
Namaste. Namaste. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We want to know that was there any notion of equality between men and women in the Vedas? If yes, then how did gender egalitarianism play out in our scriptures?
The, Studying the Vedas helps us understand what might have been the life in those days. So, when we are thinking about equality, we think about rights mostly. So, opportunities for education, opportunities for work, opportunities for different things in life, opportunities to have choice, freedom of choice, are considered to be marks of equality and respect. So that's what we find when we read the Vedas. Women have opportunities to express themselves, freedom of choice. They were given a choice with regard to the events in their life, their marriage, their life, their education, their professional practice. So we have a number of women and number of examples in the Vedas. We have women who have studied quite high, learned the Vedas. The understanding is that modern understanding is that Vedas are not allowed to be studied by women, by some people, and that's not what. When we see the Vedas actually offer to everyone um, who is willing to do that. Willing to study Vedas requires a lot of hard work, lot of commitment, lot of practice also. So it was offered to anyone that was willing to take it. So women also had a right to do that. And we have Maitrayaniya Samhita, and um, we have number of women that we can see in the Vedas who have studied quite well, who have held discussions on the Vedas, knowledge of the Vedas, which tells us there is equal rights, number of choices for women.
We also had women who used to go out to war, like you had Keki,
Yeah,
or you had yeah, she was the one who saved Dashrath's
yeah,
life, and then you also had Subhadra, who I believe was she served as Sri Krishna's
yeah,
charioteer in a particular
yeah,
war.
yeah. Satyabhama
So
also.
none of this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So none of this was, it wasn't anything new. Like women were not denied any
Right,
rights.
right. Women learned the things that were of interest to them. If they are really interested in Vedic education, they got to study Vedas. If they are interested in studying the Shastras, they got to study the Shastras. So different professions were
Oh,
available to them. They practice different professions. Yeah.
okay. Bringing this forward, fast forwarding this to modern times, what do you make out of modern Bharatiya women and how they are carrying forward this Vedic lineage, especially with respect to the wrestlers' protest, which is being spearheaded by women wrestlers like Vinesh Phogat and Sakshi Malik? What do you make of the protest?
Right. We don't know actually what was the issue of the protest because the investigation is still on. They have constituted a committee. So the issue we cannot discuss, but because it's under investigation. But women's rights, respect to women is embedded in our culture. The fact that we have women wrestlers, not just from Uttarakhand, from also other places, and women weightlifters from southern India, uh, practicing professions that are mostly associated with male is is itself an evidence that women's practice or women's practice of certain professions is not prohibited. It was not prohibited In fact, there are examples from Vijayanagara Empire. Vijayanagara Empire is a large empire in 13th to 15th centuries in southern India. Of course, there are examples in ancient India also, Shatavahana and all that. But Vijayanagara Empire, there are a number of visitors who came to visit Sri Krishna Devaraya, and they have written the women bodyguards of Sri Krishna Devaraya, and then women guards of the palace, and women in different professions. Of course, they're not they're dancers and all that, but in addition to that, there are also poetesses. There are, lots of kavyas were composed by the women during that time, 13th to 15th century. Ramayana is composed by one of the poetesses, Mulla in Telugu at the time, and Ganga Devi is another well-known poetess in that time, and of course they also talked about warrior queens. So Ganga Devi accompanied and went to the battlefield. So similar stories are known, similar history is known. So ancient history, of course, we know, and 15th, 16th centuries also we know that women practiced and women learned these things. It's only after drastic colonization and drastic cultural change that happened, after 16th century, that things have changed. But everything is coming back to what it was. Women are entering many fields of education, sports, as well as other arts and culture. Um, with the wrestlers, that's what you would see. Women have taken on the challenges and participated and learned many of these things, wrestling as well as weightlifting, and many of the things that are considered as the forte of the men. But um, but their active involvement also shows that.
Right. But would you say that the scale of gender balance, it's now tilting, it's not exactly equal. It's now, in fact, tilting against men also in some
Yeah.
places.
The draconian draconian laws enacted. Some of the laws, like the 498A, were drastic, um, which do not give any recourse to the men, and all the rights to women. So any law that is enacted should actually give equal recourse to men and women. So giving only one side of recourse to one and not giving any representation for the other, of course, is going to lead to issues. So, yeah. So there is some issues that are happening in the modern day.
Thank you for that balanced view, Lavanya ji. Moving on, I want to talk about temples. And this is also, it would be a part of this larger discussion with respect to women's rights and temple issues. What was the importance of temples in the Vedic scriptures? And what is your take on the Sabrimala temple issue?
So temples, um, like lots of the things that are associated with the culture from 5,000 years ago, lots of them did not survive. And also this racial theory of invaders versus indigenous has actually made us not learn, not understand our own culture for ourselves. So they divided the monumental culture of Indus Valley, and from the same place we have the Vedas, but they say they are both belong to different people, which seems to be not based on facts. So there might have been temples, because from 5,000 years ago, from many of these excavations in cities that are spread across Indus Valley to Gangetic Valley, there are images of gods. There are images of things that can be construed as temples. So, so I would say there is there is always within Indian religions, within Hinduism, there are always two types of practice. The practice, one of the practices was centered on image and image worship, and the second one is centered on meditation and yajnas and yagas. So both of them function together, function side by side as we see today. So both practices were part of the culture, and we would see them. And same with the Vedic period also. So different temples have different practices associated with them. There are goddess temples, god temples, and different temples. So when it comes to Ayyappa temple has its own traditional culture associated with it. So the most important feature of temples is the sacred story that is associated with that temple. So Ayyappa temple gets its speciality, gets its sacredness, gets its special place in Hinduism because of the story that is associated with it. The story associated with itself actually says that he is a monk. So when he took the vow to be a monk, he vowed not to see a woman, which is the story of the temple. So he stayed there as a monk. So if he took the vow to be a monk, not to interact with women, it makes sense that the integrity of the place is to be kept. That is what the core of the temple, right? Otherwise, what is the point of having that temple? The core of the temple is him becoming the monk, right? The core of the idea is that. So if you don't respect that, what is the integrity there? It's like any other temple, right? The speciality of the deity is the story of the temple. So I think we should respect. Different temples have different practices, and they should be respected. That's what I think.
And I think that's the whole point of Sanatan Dharma, where every deity, every person, they have their own. We realize that they are their own person, and that should not be violated. We should respect that, as opposed to, uh, as opposed to Abrahamic religions, where there is just one God or there's just one entity, and that is throughout. It's uniform across the world. But that's not the same in our case.
Right, right. Dharma is not like that. Dharma has many deities, and the different deities have different practices associated with them. So if it is all one, it's not Hinduism. It's not Dharma. So if you are protecting Hinduism, if you are protecting Dharma, the multiplicities should be protected. That's what is the integral to Hinduism.
Thank you, Lavanya ji. But taking this forward, would you say that the modern Indian state, even though it claims to be secular, is it adequately protecting the right to freedom of religion with respect to Hindus? Are we are we not compromising on this multiplicity somewhere?
Indian state is not secular at all in case of Hindu temples. If it is a secular state, why are they managing temples? They should not be managing temples. The state and the religion should be separate. Why are they managing temples? Why are they nominating these trustees and temple committees, temple management, and why are they making all these rules for temples? Of course, they can, as an outside entity, they can perform yearly audit, and yearly audit of practices, yearly audit of accounting, yearly audit of everything that's associated with the temple. But they cannot directly manage the temple. What is the government doing managing the temple?
Are they managing temples?
Yeah. All the temples in India are managed by the government nominated trustees. Why is the government nominating trustees, chairmans? What is this? What is the government doing managing this? And government actually takes fees for doing that. They take management fee. So it's
Who manages the funds of these temples actually?
lots of funds. I don't know how the funds are managed, but the audit should be publicly available to people. Temple should be managed very transparently, and it should not be managed by the government. Hindus are quite capable of managing their own temples. which they have done for thousands of years.
Just before the modern Indian state and the modern constitution came into the picture.
Right, right. So freedom of rights, freedom of practicing of religion for Hindus is limiting in India because they cannot have their temples, they cannot practice their religion in their own way because government interferes with the temple management, temple practices. In southern India, did you visit any southern Indian temples? In southern India, the temples are run like a business. So you have to pay a ticket, buy a ticket to enter. It's called darshanam ticket. To see the deity, you have to pay. So to do different pujas, you have to pay. What is this? Everybody is allowed to go into temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Respecting the practices of the
Yeah,
temple.
respecting the practices. Yeah, they should be allowed to go into the temple, respecting the practices. If they are willing to give something to the temple, donations, of course, they are open to donate. They are free to donate. But, it should not be like a business. It should not be like selling tickets.
I think there are VIP queues as
VIP
well.
queues. What is this VIP queues? Everybody should go to the temple as a devotee. Everybody is same.
Absolutely.
So, freedom of
But
religion,
when
Hindus don't have freedom of religion because their temples are controlled by government.
it's quite ironical in a
Yeah.
way. But where do you think this is coming from? I mean, where exactly is this originating from, this
There
interference
is a
into
little bit
Hindu
of,
temples?
interference, little bit of management during colonial times, during other rulers, but not this much. Uh, the British also had some control over temples. They were worried there might be rebels in these temples, so so they tried to control them. But the modern Indian state was draconian. They passed draconian laws, the endowment laws, and all these. This only comes after 1970s. So the modern Indian state is to be blamed for all the problems with the practice of Hinduism.
That's what's even more shocking, considering the fact that the modern Indian state is the one that claims to be secular. It claims that everybody has freedom. But during the time of the kings, you didn't see such practices. But now you see such practices where there is more interference than
Right.
ever in temples and how they
Mhm.
function.
Even
Uh,
simple festivals
Moving
have to be
on.
taken permission from the government.
For what, ma'am?
Even simple temples, performance of simple
Even
temples
simple
are to be,
temples.
ask for permission from the government. There is really no freedom of religion for Hindus, though. For others, of course, adequate freedom.
So these days we've been talking a lot about transgender rights as well, the LGBTQIA plus
Right.
movement. Uh, what's your take on this whole movement? And if we were to go back to the Vedic times, and if we were to go back to the Mahabharata, especially, then would you say that Amba's story from Mahabharata, does that have any bearing on this particular discussion which is going on these
Right.
days?
Hindu understanding, when it comes to Hindu understanding, Hindu classical texts as well as classical understanding, it is a gender is a fluid construct. Uh, our gods, as well as the major personalities within the classical texts, have assumed different genders at different times. For example, Shiva is emblematic of the gender fluidity. He is a mix of male and female. That's what is considered to be the soul. The soul is the mix of male and female. The body is what acquires the gender. However, sometimes this gender fluidity can be different in different persons. So it was acceptable. Ancient India accepted people having different genders or assuming different genders. Gender fluidity was an accepted concept. For example, Krishna becomes Brihanala in the story. Not Krishna, sorry. Arjuna becomes Bruhanala, becomes a woman for a month during their exile. Um, um, and also um, there is Vishnu becoming Mohini, and that story is also there. And of course, the story of Amba is actually kills herself because she was taken from her swayamvaram, and then she was not able to marry who she wanted to marry, so she gets upset with Bhishma because her life is ruined, which is rightfully so. So anyway, she prays and she wants to come back and take revenge on him. But being a woman, of course, in the next life, she was also born as a woman again. Uh, but she was blessed, even though she was born as a woman. She was blessed by Shiva to become a man. So the parents, when they were blessed with the child, they were actually informed by Shiva that this is a male. This is in fact a male. So they raise him as a male. So this is where the gender fluidity and the transgenderism comes into play. So even though born as a child, a girl child, they raised him as a male. So once she knows this, she's not male, she actually goes away and then exchanges uh, her gender with a yaksha, and then comes back as a male. So then onwards,
Like as a biological
he
male.
becomes a she becomes a male. So the transgender, the complete change from female to male.
From a woman body to
Yeah,
a man's
yeah.
body.
So the concern now in the modern world is the acceptance for the transgender people. When they become male or when they become female, they face difficulty getting accepted. But Indian culture showed through this story that there is acceptance. He was immediately accepted as a male. He was regarded as a male. And then, of course, he was taken into the battlefield, right? Krishna drove only Arjuna into the battlefield. The only other person that was taken into the battlefield was Shikandi, the male Shikandi. So after he changed, he is perfectly, completely accepted as a male. So when somebody, it's a rare case, but it can happen. Gender issues can happen. So we should accept them as they transform.
But do you think that a line needs to be drawn with respect to how far or how much whether we allow little children to undergo
That-
these
that's where
operations
that's
or these
that's where I draw the
procedures?
line. The Mahabharata also says he was an adult before he was transformed. So we should wait until someone becomes an adult, then allow the
What
transformation.
exactly is happening with respect to this? Because in India it's not happening yet. But what exactly is happening with respect to this in the Western countries? Are they allowing kids to undergo these
Mhm.
procedures? And who gives the consent for these children who are undergoing these procedures?
Yeah,
Who is taking that decision for them?
that is a problem. Parents are sometimes kept away from making this decision, and then they're actually helping children, very young children, which should not be allowed. That's what I think. The gender transformation should be allowed, but the child should be allowed to grow. Then only
Make an informed choice.
they can have an informed choice.
So currently in the Western countries, it's the parents of the kid who are making the decision to allow the kid to undergo the operation.
Not always. In some cases, but not always.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So which is the problem?
Uh,
The child should be growing as a child, and then should be allowed to make his or her decision once they are adult.
right. And are there also times where apart from the parent, someone else is making that decision for the
That is
child?
also a problem. So sometimes
Is that
it
happening?
is happening. Sometimes the children don't tell the family, their mother or father, and they tell the social worker, or they tell our counselor. They tell outsiders. who might interfere, not always, but who might interfere sometimes, with the idea that they are helping, they are thinking they are helping. But I think it should be, this decision should be taken very cautiously, and the woman or man or child, girl child or boy child, should have the time to grow. Once they grow up, then they can make an informed decision. And it's not a difficult transformation to go through. They can go through the transformation anytime. They can take that 2 years and do their transformation once they are willing to do it as an adult.
Yeah, because adolescence is a very volatile kind of period where our body, and our thoughts, emotions, everything undergoes a change. So we don't really know what outlook we have on life once we grow
Right.
up.
Right. As a teenager, they're too young to make a decision, and they are not fully grown. So their brains are not fully grown. They are not fully grown. So it's important that they grow.
True. Lavanya ji, moving on, if we talk about the Himalayan region, like just yesterday there was news that a particular glacier has fallen apart in the Devbhoomi region, the Himalayan Uttarakhand region of India. Would you say that what is happening now in the name of tourism, in the name of development, is it costing us our cultural heritage, especially with respect to the Himalayas, because they have held such a high place of importance in our culture?
Right. Um, I have always expressed my concern about this, about the Himalayan region being very fragile region and subjected to development. But being a fragile region, it's also strategically important region. It's, the Himalayas are located between three countries, which are not really on great friendly terms with each other. So the problem is, um, one cannot leave it if the other country doesn't leave it. So the development happens from all sides. So India cannot unilaterally decide not to do or not to develop from its side, because on the other side development is going on. On the Chinese side and Pakistan side, the development is going on. Incessant development is going on. So unilateral withdrawal cannot happen. But destruction is happening. Destruction is happening for sure, because it's a fragile environment. Um, uh, Earthquakes are very common, and changing glaciers are very common. So we cannot stop the development, and Indian government cannot withdraw unilaterally from this developmental perspective, because it cannot leave itself open to others. So the one thing that can be done is to propose certain guidelines for development, and share these guidelines with also others on the borders, so that everyone can come to some agreement on how these regions can be protected while also development is going on. So it's a very fragile and strategically important region. So it's a problematic place.
Like earlier, I remember, say, like even 10 years back or 15 years back, if ever you went to these areas, you needed
Mhm.
permits. So, do you think that regulation of tourism would help in any manner? And do you think that tourism is contributing to the mess that the Himalayas are becoming?
Mm, both ways, but I don't think we should control the tourism, and we should not bring this permit system into place again. The permit system is the worst system for any country to have. A citizen of the country should be able to travel any place that he wants to travel. So for the citizens, there should not be these permits, and that cannot be brought back. Um,
And for foreigners?
Foreigners, maybe you can have limitations. I don't know. That's for the government to decide. But for the citizens, it should not, because the controls and permits are done only by totalitarian states. For example, China controls people on where they can travel, where they cannot travel. They have to take permit to travel from their home state to the other places. But no other state does that. No other democratic state does that. So it's a no-no for any democratic country. What India can have is guidelines on development. What can be developed, what cannot be developed, what can be built, what cannot be built, and that kind of rules. But no permits at all. That goes against democracy. But limits can be put.
For ecologically sensitive
Sacred places, like
regions?
many of the sacred places, churches, mosques, they have how many people can go there each year. So they can have, they can say this year, this month, 5,000 people can visit. That's,
Yeah.
yeah. But other than that, it should not have permits or anything like that.
Lavanya ji, I'm a little curious about this because I went through your work on the feminine figures in Mahabharata, and I would like you to throw some light on that.
So it's my work of love. The Mahabharata is an important text, has a myriad of personalities, especially the female personalities, the heroic personalities, as well as education, meditation, spirituality, all walks of life. Anyone you see, they're the best. The best of the woman you can find in the Mahabharata. So Mahabharata, of course, the story is written, but each episode actually has substantial important narrative for the woman. Many of the scholars, even Western scholars, have noted no other text actually has an amount that much of narrative or that much of importance given to women. They even said maybe women did not write it, but maybe women somehow contributed to it so that their stories were not eliminated. Because many other world literature has eliminated the women's stories. Women's stories might have been part of the stories at one time, but
You don't
they
hear that.
remain to be peripheral, very little, very small stories. And in Mahabharata's case, the stories are long,
You're all central.
yeah, elaborate and very interesting, right? So Draupadi is central to the story. If Draupadi is not there, Mahabharata war is not there. So
Not going to happen.
and Savitri is meditation personified. Savitri actually shows what spirituality is considered in Mandukya Upanishad. Mandukya Upanishad actually talks about the three states of mind, and then how this actually manifests. And that's what you would see in the case of Savitri. Savitri takes this fast.
How?
She takes the fast, and she does this night all night standing, and then the next day she actually goes with her husband to the forest. So this shows the three states of the mind. The first one is not sleeping, staying awake, so she's controlling her mind. The next one is fast, she's controlling her body. And the next one, she's going with her husband. Her husband, of course, collapses, but she is able to see the yama, because her spiritual mind has opened. Otherwise you cannot see. So that's the reason.
You can't
Yeah.
even.
So she could talk to him, communicate with him. So she passed through these three states of mind. The mind has passed through, the nidra and sushupta, and the awakening stage. The mind has passed through, the human limitations, the physical limitations of sleep, and all that. So it entered the next stage of conscious. So she was able to see, she was able to communicate with him. that we understand from the story, because he actually passed out, right? And he forgot what time it was. So when he woke up, when he got the time back, his life back, when he got his life back, he got the time back. So he doesn't remember anything else. So he's like, oh, I slept. What is this? This is too much into night. It was evening, right? That's what he was saying. So, she passed beyond time. She passed beyond time. She
She went
passed
there.
beyond conscious. So she can remember, she can tell all these things, and she can have this experience, but he did not. And the three steps
Okay.
are actually seen in the Mandukya Upanishad. So she's this personification of the spirituality itself as described in the Mandukya Upanishad.
And the route that she takes to attain this state is,
Uh,
what route does she exactly take?
she did a vow. A vow is called a vratam.
A
Yeah,
penance.
and many women nowadays also do Vata Savitri Vratam, and Chat Puja has
Okay.
similarities with it. Chat Puja also,
That
long
is
3 day fasting and then tying the thread around the tree and all that. It's very similar to what Savitri has done. So in southern India, it's called Savitri, Vata Savitri Ratam, and in North India, it's similarities with Chat Puja.
Chhat Puja. Ultimately, the traditions in the north and the south, they come from the same place. The roots are the
Hmm.
same. But why do you think there is such a divide that's visible in society today, despite the fact that the roots are the same?
It's a politicization. The colonialists, of course, it served their purpose. Their purpose was divide and rule. So for colonialists to create these theories, Aryan, Dravidian, and dividing people into different categories, different classes, races, it was useful for them. And later on, it was useful for the politicians. It gives them a, kind of a defined vote bank, right? If you can get some
But
people,
don't people see through it?
they should see through
Wouldn't
it.
you say that people are able to see through it?
They-
I mean, especially because if you go down south, then you find people so much more connected or so much more aware of the practices that were there during the Vedic
Mhm.
times. And yet, if you look at it today, then the divide is really big. The gap between the south and the north, it's just going on increasing. Shouldn't people be able to see through that?
They should see through these political tendencies, this politicization. They should be aware of their roots. More history is necessary, and then this artificial history from our books should be changed. Our books are part of the problem. This Aryan theory is just a theory, right? It's a theory that is constructed from some kind of linguistic, very minor linguistic theory. And how can this be taught as a fact? It's taught as a fact, as a racial fact. How can you bring up a race, an artificially constructed race, as if it's a fact? It's a fact of invasion and then occupation and all that. That should be definitely taken out of the books. Indian history, India doesn't have any evidence of any other races invading India that far back. So the Aryan term is artificial. The whole idea, concept of invasion is a artificial theory. That should all be taken out of history. So there is this divide, but half of the divide is coming from these colonial constructions, and the perpetration, the continuation of these in the textbooks, as well as politicization by the modern politicians. So it should be changed.
Thank you so much, Lavanya ji, for joining us today and taking us through a lot of important topics. It was great to have you on the show, and we hope that we can do this sometime soon again.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you very much for the nice interview.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.